how are we understanding the word the Enlightenment? We're talking about the sort of 17th, 18th century movement in Europe. We have in mind figures like Kant, David Hume, Newton. Do you want to expand on what you have in mind there?
Yeah, and so, I mean, the Enlightenment is properly understood as a continuation of a movement that started, let's say, in the Renaissance with the scientific revolution. In some ways, it is the winning of reason, like the notion that human beings are reasonable, and that reason is the way by which we're going to exist, and then applying that thinking, that reason, and also the methods of scientific exploration and analysis to the world. And, so we have a method in order to be able to predict phenomena, to be able to understand phenomena. We have a method by which we can analyze things. And that method is very powerful, and it yields power. Like, it's the best way to understand it. It yields more capacity to control and to manage reality, manage physical reality, make spaceships, make all the things that we enjoy, which are quite wonderful. But there's also a blind spot in that. There's a blind spot in this Enlightenment, especially as it moves towards secularism, and especially as it moves towards atheism, because there's a sense in which we start to believe that this reason and this capacity for reason is ultimate, and that it's sufficient. And then we apply it. But the problem actually happens when we start to then turn it on ourselves. When we come to the point where we now have to understand ourselves as agents, as conscious beings, then reason starts to become loopy. It starts to not completely be enough, especially in understanding how identities function. Reason does not provide identity. Reason provides analysis for identities that are already given. But the identities seem to be a given, or to come, to use religious language, they come from heaven. Like, you need the identity before you can apply the methods of science. And so because of that, it leaves humans with something missing in their experience that they know is real, that they experience all the time, but that cannot be contained by this process.
Yeah. So one descriptor that's used for the Enlightenment is the Age of Reason. Now, I really dislike this because I love the medieval figures. And of course, the medieval figures like Aquinas, Scotus, Occam, early medieval like Anselm, I mean, these guys use the reason. So how in what sense is reason really triumphant in Enlightenment? I mean, some people say that it's reason plus the throwing off of authority, religious authority. Alistair McIntyre thinks it's reason plus throwing off the fixed sense of human nature.
Yeah, it's religion and pride. It's the pride. It's the pride of reason. It's the best way to understand it. And so the manner in which the medievals understood reason was that it was derivative. It was derivative and manifested by something transcendent, like a mystery which is beyond understanding, which reveals itself in reason. And so there's always an aspect of the real which it cannot be probed. And you'll find that in all the medieval, whether West or East or West, there's something beyond reason that cannot be probed, and it gives to reason, and reason flows out of it. And what it does is that it means that reason is not sufficient. Reason does not contain all things. And what it also, how can I say this? It eliminates the problem of the pride of reason. And so in the Enlightenment, the idea is like, we can do this. We are the ones. We have it. We try to contain reality within reason. In some ways, it's the beginning of a revolutionary trope. It's the beginning of the revolutionary structure, where the human tries to take from God, right, the top of the hierarchy, tries to say, no, we're the top. We are the ones who can, with our reason and our mind, can analyze the world. But as soon as that happens, then things start to devolve, and you find yourself at the end of that process, you find yourself in a situation that is not reasonable at all, that is actually completely unreasonable, but not unreasonable in the sense that God is beyond reason, unreasonable in the sense that our passions and our desires and our whims end up ruling in the end. And so in my conflict with Lindsay, I quoted Goya's famous statement. There's a print by Goya which says, "The sleep of reason produces monsters, or the dream of reason produces monsters." Right, and that is the situation that we find ourselves in. Is that having insisted so much on reason and having pushed to the margin the things which are not reasonable, they at some point, that unreason just crashes back in. And in, like you said, in the medieval world, that unreason, or the that which exceeds reason, would in some ways have been pushed up towards the glory of God, right? Would have been something like the excess of a church in a village, like the golden, all of this kind of unreasonable excess that we experience in reality. We give it up as glory to God, but if you don't do that, then it turns into the hybrid demons that come and poke you at night, like all these freaks and intermediary beings that start to appear in the world and will try to destroy reason that way.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it certainly doesn't seem to me that this sort of standards of rational inquiry got much better with the Enlightenment. It doesn't strike me that Hume is any smarter than Occam or Aquinas, but certainly I like your way of describing it as this elevating reason, the pride of reason. And I guess I put this actually to Pete Boghossian as well last week. This idea that we need both reason and mystery, because that's roughly kind of what you're getting at. And is your criticism, or your not even your criticism, your understanding of Lindsay, and to some extent Pete, is they just want to have reason? Is that right?
Well, that's what you see, and you see that in the Stephen Hicks, Pinker, Lindsay, all of that crew. They have in my impression, a twisted image, first of all, what humans are, and second of all, of how reality works. And, it can look very convincing at the outset, because what they're saying is, if we were just reasonable, then we would have a perfect society, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those, like, communism has never been tried problems, which is that humans are not only reasonable. Reality cannot be limited to that which is reasonable. And it just cannot, even like epistemologically, we cannot access all of reality through reason. And we're starting to know that even scientifically. This point is that we cannot quantify all things. We cannot analyze all of reality. There always has to be some miracle, whether the miracle is the Big Bang or whatever, or something at the outset that is not part of the system. That is just an inevitable aspect of how a being lays itself out. And so it becomes difficult, because, they'll say we just need to, if we were only reasonable and reasonable individuals, then all things would work. But we're not that. Human beings are not just that. They are that to some extent. Yeah. And so then again, it has this problem. It's like, if you have a blind spot, you have this blind spot, which is the unreasonable aspect, whether you understand it as that which is beyond reason or that which is below reason. There's an aspect of reality which cannot be reduced to reason. If you just keep it on the side as a blind spot, at some point it comes crashing back in. And so you can complain as much as you want about like crazy leftists or intercategories that are smashing into our world, and hybridization and all of this weird stuff that we're seeing happening. But that is what's going to happen.
Yeah, and this is what's happened to Dawkins as well. Of course, he was aiming at this sort of rational scientific utopia, but then even back in 2014, he lost his Humanist of the Year award because of something he'd said about men not being able to.
Yeah, because he didn't want to play the. So that's a great example.
Yeah.
Like the great example of what happens if you don't have the proper mystery at the outset, at the beginning of your reasonable process. Then you'll have other mysteries that will be inserted, other dogmas and other aporias and contradictions. And so someone will say exactly that, like a man can be a woman, straight faced and look at you. And what they're yearning for, like what they're desiring for, is something like the Trinity, for example. It's something like there is a mystery about how unity and multiplicity coexist and how they infinitely coexist, because we can't completely account for the manner in which one and many function in our experience of the world. And so we perceive, we have insight about an infinite, transcendent way in which those two are joined together. And so that's the kind of mystery that the medieval, for example, could see as the outset of reality. But if you don't have that, then you end up with a man is a woman. The problem with the Enlightenment is that it, at least on the face of it, it wanted to, let's say, systematize, turn the world into an encyclopedia, right? You know, like that's one of the reasons why the encyclopedia was such a great part of the Enlightenment project. It's like, we're going to define everything. We're going to measure everything. We're going to quantify everything. And we'll basically understand reality. But it's ignoring an aspect, which is that there are aspects of reality which cannot be categorized for different reasons. And one of that is the intercategorical, the monster. The monster cannot be categorized. That is one. And then the other one is rather the transcategorical, or the supracategorical, that which gives way for categories, the infinite, being itself, or the different aspects that are beyond simple analytical categories. But what I'm saying is that in removing the religious part, removing the transcendent aspect, what happened now, and this is why postmodernism in some ways is inevitable to the Enlightenment, is that need for that which is beyond reason is not going away in people. It's just part of how humans are, but they can find it in the monster. Like they can find that titillation of the transgressive, the titillation of that which is beyond categories in the intercategorical, and so that's what you find in the, sorry.
I get that. I hear you saying that the Enlightenment were trying to put everything away in their boxes, but I'm not an Aristotle expert, but I mean, he was engaged in that sort of activity way back then. I say, granted, he had more openness to the transcendent, but
there's nothing wrong with trying to categorize reality.
So as soon as you're getting rid of, okay,
it's just as you try to do it ultimately. Now, the problem, again, the issue with the Enlightenment is not just that, is that the Enlightenment already, even at the outset, was not completely that project. There's a dark side to the Enlightenment, which people call the counter-Enlightenment. And like you said, Kant is part of the Enlightenment. It's hilarious because, ask Stephen Hicks if Kant is part of the Enlightenment. He'll tell you, no, Kant is the counter-Enlightenment, And so it's like this weird idea that the Enlightenment thinkers, there are aspects to them that a lot of the modern Enlightenment defenders don't like. And they put them in what they call the counter-Enlightenment, which is in some ways aspects of unreason and magic and hermeticism and all of this stuff, which is like a weird parasite on the Enlightenment that you can't completely get rid of. It continues on through characters like Swedenborg or Jacob Böhm or all of these esotericists in the Western canon that are not opposite to the Enlightenment. They're the same. They're the same people.
Yeah.
It's like Descartes spent a lot of his life trying to contact the Order of the Rosy Cross. And it's like, so these are the same people. They're not different types. Yes. So there's this weird parasite in the Enlightenment of magic and esotericism and Freemasonry, all this stuff.
Yeah, interesting.